My name's Terry Woloszyn. I come from Painted Lemur Studios. I'm one of the founding directors, and afterwards as well, you can also introduce yourself to our founding CEO. She's also here in the audience. So to begin with, the big question is then, who's Terry? Well, certainly if you came to the website prior to arriving at the show, you could Google me, you could look me up on LinkedIn, you can see that I've been in the industry for quite some time. I've been associated with a number of startups, both representing them in Canada as US-based startups, as well as founding 4 of my own. But rather than go through those details, which you can read on your own, I figured since this is a gaming show, sort of like, when you're at a dog show, you talk about dog years, I figured let's talk about people in terms of game consoles. So where probably the majority of the audience is sitting here as 3rd or 4th generation gaming consoles, I fit in probably a little earlier than that. That's right, I'm a Generation 0 console. Which means that you can look at it as I'm either really aged or I'm really experienced. I'd like to prefer the latter. Today we've got a great deal of ground to cover, and I'm going to start off with sort of an audience poll to begin with. How many of you are here as developers? There's a few hands, that's great. How many of you are here as just gamers? It's about 50-50, okay. How many of you distinguish yourselves as developers versus publishers? How many people think they're a publisher of games? Yeah, very few hands, okay. But what we're going to do is talk about the business of play, basically. So we're going to start off with some fun and maybe some not so fun facts that you probably need to be aware of, because in this industry, like any startup in any industry, what you don't know really can hurt you. So we'll then proceed from there to how do I get started as an indie developer or publisher. I'm going to talk a great deal about Business Planning 101, and you're going to find out why I've decided to focus on that as we go through the presentation. But suffice it to say that a lot of people will jump into the deep end of the pool feet first and realize, not even do I not know how to swim and I don't have my water wings on, I may not even be attired appropriately for being in the pool. And that's the analogy we're going to use here for why it's important to understand what you're getting yourself into and how to prepare yourself, and that's what business planning is all about. And then from there, we'll take it as the calls to action, the next step. So some fun facts in terms of what we're seeing in the industry today. There's certainly 329 video game companies are currently operating in Canada. 329 in Canada alone. That's stunning, isn't it? And as far as Stats Canada is concerned, 173% is the projected revenue increase between 2 years ago and up to 2017. That's a stunning revenue increase. And $12.3 billion is the projected revenue for mobile games alone by 2017. And so when you're looking at that kind of thing, that's huge incentive, right? Talk about a big carrot. I want a slice of that pie. Let's take that 12.3 billion divided by 329. What's my cut? Well, that actually represents global mobile gaming, but the point is it's a very big pie that you can get a slice of. And 2.7 million Canadians are self-employed entrepreneurs, which is 8% of the total population. So 1.2 billion applications were downloaded for mobile phones and tablets over Christmas week alone. That's billion with a B, right? That's Dr. Evil numbers, right? 1 billion apps. That's what we're looking at here in terms of the potential market. Now, when I wound back the Wayback Machine and showed you where I started, certainly IT, when I got into it, was the domain of the IBMs of the world. Microsoft was still Bill Gates wondering how he could sell BASIC. And Commodore, my first computer that I ever worked on was a shared Commodore PET. Does anyone remember the Commodore PET? Oh, I really feel old. Thanks, guys. You should remember, sir. No, okay. So now some not so fun facts. If you're going to get into this, is that over 90% of startups fail. Let me say that again. Over 90% of the startups fail. And it's not necessarily due to having a bad game, like someone really didn't understand what their derivative of Tetris was supposed to be in terms of gameplay that turned people off. That's a part of it, but to begin with, it comes out with things like time to profit. A lot of indie developers are young folks coming out of university, moving back into mom and dad's, above the garage or back into their bedroom if they haven't already had it converted into a home office by their parents. But they don't realize that at some point you really do have to make some money. And it takes time to make some money. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we go through the business planning. But that's probably one of the first things that kill people, is understanding the time to profit. The second thing is understanding your market size and demographics. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, again, how do you identify and plan for a particular market segment. Funding and cash flow is another big concern. And there are easily a dozen ways that I'm going to enumerate today for you in terms of how can I fund my startup. And it's not just I'm going to eat the cheaper pizza or I'm going to buy cola in bulk. There is some serious funding concerns that you need to be aware of, because you're going to need help, like it or not. The first time you get a royalty check from iTunes or from the Play Store, you have to worry about taxes, which means you're going to have to worry about an accountant, which means you're going to have to worry about remitting those taxes. You're going to have costs above and beyond you sitting in your bedroom till 4 in the morning programming. You have to worry about customer acquisition. The biggest misconception that pervades the indie community today is the same misperception that has pervaded startups since the dawn of time. And that is, if I build a better mousetrap, they will come. It's that field of dreams proposition. If I build it, they will come. No, they won't, because they won't know a thing about you. What's worse, they are going to know about the people who are advertising a game that is similar to yours. And again, we've been around long enough to remember history is replete with examples of better technologies that went by the boards simply because the lesser technologies had better advertising. It's that simple. So even though you're an indie developer, or a small startup, or even a large startup, or even a going concern, you need to worry about the customer acquisition, because sure as shooting, you're up against 1 million apps in that app store. How are you going to rise above the noise? Your monetization strategy is another key factor that is usually left as an afterthought. And again, that's a very important consideration that you need to worry about before you even start writing code. So for those of you that raised your hand, yeah, I'm a developer and I'm a publisher, you need to think about that more than anything else, because it's a foundation cornerstone toward your success, is what is the monetization strategy or strategies. You may even adopt a hybrid set of strategies in order to have your game make money. You need to worry about the competition, probably less so in the gaming industry than in other industries, but you still need to worry about it. Because at the end of the day, a lot of successful games are simply derivatives of previously successful games. How many here have Angry Birds on their smart device? Oh, come on, one admitted it. But the reality is, Angry Birds is a classic example. And again, just look in the App Store, look in the Play stores, look online, and you'll find that the majority of the successful games are actually just derivatives of previously successful games. A lot of indies, in fact, will go on a harvest hunt for games where they can grab the source code from 20 or 30 years ago that were played on things like the PET and the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64s and the Apple IIs, and basically something they can grab and port and move forward with. And a lot of the larger organizations that had titles back then are harvesting their own titles and their own intellectual property in order to bring that forward again. I just about fell on the floor when I was researching this to find Wolfenstein. Heck, I still have the source code from one of the open source versions of Wolfenstein. And there it is being released again for the current platforms. So competition is important to be aware of. Product and service. Look how low down on the list this is in terms of the success ratings. So the product and service, like I said, the Tetris from hell as an example, has to factor into whether you fail or not, but it's not number one, believe it or not. Like I said earlier, lesser products will win if they have the other factors in place. And finally, or actually second to last, scale up and growth. A lot of organizations, remarkably enough, the ones that don't fail outright in the first 6 months of their lives or the first 2 years, are victims of their own success. Depending on what it is about your game or product or service that you're offering, how many, for example, massive multiplayer online games have gone by the boards because they were too successful and the founder, creators, publishers couldn't scale their infrastructure up fast enough? That's, again, something to consider. It's fine to say, hey, I've got a free instance up on Amazon, or I've got a Rackspace server all ready to go. But if you can't scale fast enough to meet your demand, what happens to your players and your community? They go to the next game in line. So, the final point here of my top list is infighting. And again, this is related more to victims of success than failure. Again, the industry is replete with examples of organizations that literally tore themselves apart based on greed. It's that simple. The founders get together and one or more of them get greedy, or one or more of them want out, and they're taking what they contributed with them, and it's going to tear the company apart, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the factors that we're going to talk about that you need to worry about. So when you're getting started, here's Terry's list of things that you should jot down and be aware of. And number one is be prepared to work. Now, if you're coming right out of university, you know what work is. Right? More than one all-nighter creating a compiler for one of my programming classes, or doing some experiment for physics, or whatever the case may be. So, but the point is you need to be prepared to work, but also, it's not a badge of honor to say, I was hospitalized when I dropped dead of exhaustion last week. You need to take care of yourself. At IBM, we called this the life-work balance. Now, some of us had a bit of an inside joke. 20% of us worked, 80% had a life, and there was your balance. But the point is, everyone should contribute, and everyone should share in that life-work balance. You need to take care of yourself. Obviously, you need a good idea. You know, you don't want to reinvent the Tetris from hell. You obviously want to start off with a good idea that you think is going to be palatable to your target market. You want to get good tools. And while some developers, successful developers, will tell you, go and buy the tools, I think there's enough tools to get started, open source especially, or free, or some student version that you can get started with. Point is, though, make sure that the tools are appropriate for the job. So tooling is a good part of what you need to get started. Set realistic goals. This is key. I mean, so often I talk to startups and the founders, and the goals they've set are the traditional hockey stick growth. You know, that's what we call it, right? When you take a look at their growth projections, it's going to be 6 months from now, we're just going to take off. The reality is, look over the last 30 to 40 years of tech startup, and you discover very quickly that meteoric rise happens after a great deal of experience and a great deal of effort and a great deal of money's been expended. There truly are no overnight successes. If you take a look, for example, there's music videos as one example. Gangnam Style is the one that comes to mind. And everyone thought, wow, that thing went viral. I just can't believe that was amazing how that just took off. No, that didn't just take off. That was a great deal of back office promotion. That was a great deal of money being expended. That was a great deal of positioning for interviews and playlists and everything else before that thing actually went viral. And that's something you need to be aware of, is set those realistic goals. Do you have the resources to promote the game, or are you going to have to have your growth go organically? And if so, what are those realistic goals to achieve then? Find good people. While a lot of people will say, yeah, you can start off in your bedroom and go at it alone. That's true. There are some people that are talented enough to be able to do the art, be able to do the music, be able to do the game engine, be able to do the integration of that, be able to have all the I/O if it's a particular game that requires a special controller, whatever the case may be. Those are few and far between. Get yourself a good group of people as far as the game development goes, but also get yourself a good group of people as far as running the business goes. You're going to run into situations, if you're even moderately successful, where again, as I said earlier, you're going to have to worry about taxes. Your government's going to take their cut, like it or not. What's more, depending on how you market your game, we're going to touch on this, later on, more than one government is going to take a cut, which means you may have to be worrying about paying your taxes in the US, even though you're Canadian-based. If you're trying to sell through iTunes, for example, or the App Store. A lot of startups don't even realize that. They might need a tax identification number or a social security number in the States in order to even register with Apple to sell your games abroad. And then who's responsible for the tax collection and remittance in each jurisdiction or region, as Apple calls it, where your game's available? Those are the kinds of business questions that need to be answered. So find good people to help you with that, whether it's someone as a coach or advisor, which is a capacity that we do, or someone who is part of your team on the payroll, or a service to you like a lawyer or an accountant, whoever the case may be. Another one is understand project management, and this gets back to set realistic goals. You know, how many times do you say, yeah, I'm going to be a great game developer, I'm really going to be gung-ho, I'm just going to pull a few all-nighters, I'm going to get that engine out, and then a few more all-nighters, and it's not going to happen. Life will always intervene. There will always be a party somewhere. There will always be a frag fest somewhere. There will always be a long weekend somewhere. And the next thing you know it, you're 6 months behind. And you're waking up one morning going, what happened in the last 6 months? Life will intervene. So understand project management and be pragmatic about all of those facets in terms of project management, to the point where, and I love this one, always double or triple your estimates. A couple of you are already nodding your head. Oh yeah, we already had that. You just take a look from a project management perspective, set those milestones, set those goals, and then reset them. And in some cases, reset them again, even before you start. Set yourself some realistic goals and expectations. And if you're first time out, I swear to goodness, triple your estimates. It's sort of like the Montgomery Scott School of Engineering expectation setting, right? What did he always do in Star Trek? Whenever the captain asked him, Scotty, when can the engines be back online? And he's going, Captain, the lithium crystals are screwed. We're probably going to get it sometime next week. But for you, 1 hour. Before the end of the episode, I promise, warp drive. That is what you want to do is, if necessary, basically overset your estimates and then exceed those expectations that you've set by delivering ahead of time. Avoid feature creep. And I put this one in here because this is an important part, again, from your business strategy as well as your game development strategy. There's others that will talk about game development, do's and don'ts and best practices today, and I'm sure you can talk to some of the developers and publishers that are here. But I put it here at a business level because this is an important point. It's stick to your knitting time. Do the minimum you need to be successful to get that game out. What kills more games, and again, history is replete with examples of these, right? I was a big Duke Nukem fan. Was, past tense, right? My sons got me Duke Nukem for one of my later in life birthdays. Big disappointment. And why was it delayed? Well, one of the reasons was exactly that, feature creep. And what happens a lot of times is new platforms, new gaming opportunities, whatever the case may be, passes people by. Again, history is replete with examples of great games that would have been great single-player games, but you had someone decide, you know what, let's turn this into a multiplayer game. And it kills the game. If the designers had just stuck to their knitting, they would have had a success on their hands. So avoid feature creep. Arrange your funding. Even if it's, for the object-oriented people in the house, even if it's through inheritance. That was one of the jokes, guys. Yeah, a few of them laughing, they got it. The point is, arrange your funding. I'm going to talk about different funding strategies that you can adopt today as well. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that has been true again since the dawn of time. So let's talk about Planning 101. Let's actually get started here. So, very quickly, we're going to talk about concept. We're going to talk about your company. We're going to talk about your games. We're going to talk about how you assess and address the market. We're going to talk about monetization strategies, revenue forecasts, marketing plan, social or web plans, management team, the bottom line, your cash flow analysis, and finally your financial plan. And a lot of the developers are sitting there going, oh crap, I'm back in an economics class. Yes, you are. Unfortunately, it's going to follow you. When I was in university, one of the classes the engineers were required to take, believe it or not, was an economics class. And it was partly to ensure that as an engineer, as a designer, as a developer, whatever your case may be, you always have a real world context to live in. The reality is we live in Canada especially, we're still a capitalist society. This is what makes the world turn, is money, is fundage. So making sure that you've got the financial plan and your cash flow and your bottom line addressed is important. All right, so starting off with concept. There's three aspects, when you're working on a business plan, there's three aspects that you need to worry about. Your objectives, your mission, and your keys to success. Notice I didn't say mission statement. I mean, that was a big thing in the 80s, right? Your mission statement. And it was supposed to be this long, grandiose, completely unachievable set of statements that everyone's supposed to be really impressed with, that cost you millions of dollars by some consultant to craft for you, but you never lived by it. And it wound up on a poster in a boardroom in your head office. Impressive. What a mission should be, and I'm skipping ahead over objective, but what a mission should be is a simple internal message for you and your employees. It truly is your values that will guide your decision making, both at a business level and a gaming level. That's what it should be. You know, anyone can name Google's mission? Do no evil, right? That's debatable, but, but it's a mission statement that they make decisions on, in their products, in their interaction with the community, and the like. So define a mission statement. It's your core values of the company, vision to guide decisions. Objectives should be your top 3 or 4 measurable objectives. And I truly mean measurable. You know, as I was sitting in the audience, I overheard a conversation. A couple of gentlemen were talking about analytics. Let's instrument our website. Let's take a look at what's going on. And we'll talk a little bit about that as far as instrumenting your games for analytics, so you can get a better handle on how the gameplay is going, etc. But the point is, you want to make sure that you can measure things today. You want to make sure that these goals are something you can achieve, and the only way you know you've achieved it, you've crossed the finish line, is to know where that finish line is. And so set those goals. And finally, keys to success. What will make the difference between success and failure? And this means you have to be honest with yourself. I've seen some business plans that I've applauded, where the founder has put into the business plan, a key to success is I will stop getting up at noon. The failed business plan says, I'll start getting up at 1, right? You need to make sure that you are honest with yourself when you're writing this section of your business plan. The next thing then is the company. And so the summary is really W5. This is uniquely Canadian, so I decided to use it, right? The who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. So who are you as an organization, both from a personnel perspective, as well as from a corporate identity perspective. There's a reason why corporations in Canada and elsewhere in the world are legal entities unto themselves. They are, you know, not quite living and breathing, but in their own way they are. They can be sued. They can sue from a legal perspective. They pay taxes like other entities. They are treated for all intents and purposes as first-class citizens. So you need to think about who your organization is, who you are. What is it that company does? What are you doing? Where are you doing it? And this not only means the traditional brick and mortar, where's your head office, depending on what kind of products or services you're offering. And just as an aside, I'll give you an example. You know, when Salesforce first started offering their CRM SFA products in the cloud, I mean, Mark Benioff coined the phrase software as a service and cloud. And many years later, when all the privacy concerns, all of the data legislation came into effect, where Europeans, for example, the Swiss is a even finer grained example, do not allow customer data to leave the Swiss jurisdiction. How on earth can they possibly use Salesforce? And so one of the things that they probably thought of and lamented was, why didn't we think about opening up our data centers in a data neutral jurisdiction? So the where may actually come to haunt you years later in terms of where you're setting up your operation, but also where you're trying to market your products. So be aware of that. Where, the when. Timing, like it or not, is everything. Is your game at the right place at the right time? That's a big question mark. You need to be aware of that. So when you're summarizing your company, try and describe, is the when okay? Or are you just ahead of the curve? There are a lot of business plans that realistically say, we're going to predicate our system on the next release of iOS because it has the following features or functions. You know, if you were at the Apple Game Developer Conference, they announced Swift. And Swift is going to revolutionize and become the new de facto standard for game development and other app development. It's a normalization strategy for all other APIs. That's great, but put that into your business plan. If you're going to predicate your success of your company in terms of the summary, make sure you're putting that kind of thing, the when Swift is stable. You know, I was part of a startup many years ago where we based the product on Java 1.2. The garbage collection didn't even work. You know, for the developers in the room, they're going, oh, how on earth did you do? And it was enterprise software. It was B2B software. It was data integration software. But we knew from our business planning that we would be contributing to the community. In fact, if you looked at the Java bug parade back in the late 90s, you saw that company's name everywhere. We fed bugs hourly into the bug parade. Point being, though, that our business planning also recognized that Java would progress to a point where, and our revenues would progress accordingly because our costs for support would decrease, our costs for development would decrease accordingly. We planned for that. We took a bet on Java, we planned for that, as an example. And most importantly, the why. Why are you doing this? If the why is to just make money, you're just being crass about it, I suggest you're gonna fail. You need to love what you're doing. You need to have a passion for making video games. You have to have a passion for getting up early and programming, maybe when you don't want to, for going to conferences, for going to training, for interacting with other people, doing what you need to do. So, the next thing then is ownership. As I said earlier, infighting can kill a company. So when you're doing your business planning and you're starting out, you need to make sure that you effectively have a prenup agreement. It's a partnership agreement. It's the prenup for business. It not only defines how you will split profits and proceeds, but it also defines for you examples of if one of the members, for example, is deceased, what's the inheritance rights for their family? I know of one startup I worked with many years ago where, while they loved one of the founding partners, they hated his wife. It was that Yoko Ono sort of case. They did not want his wife to get anywhere near the shares. And so the agreement was that there was basically a first right of refusal to buy the shares from the estate. That kind of thing is built in. And if someone wants to leave before there's a company exit or a buyout, or if the company's going a different direction and they just want to go, there could be a shotgun buyout clause, for example. Current fair market value of the shares, everyone else buys it, or I get to sell it on the open market, whatever the case may be. So having that prenup will keep the company going before you start tearing your IP apart and wind up in court. So your games, the very first thing you do when you're describing in your business plan your game are things like, what platform am I running on? What's the gameplay going to look like? What special features am I going to be basing this on? How am I going to be doing scoring and graphics and music? And to that end then, try and get some feedback based on what you wrote in that section of your business plan. Before you even commit one line of code, even just mock up some of the screens. And you've seen that on things like Kickstarter, which I'll talk about when we get to the monetization and the funding side. But mock up some screens if you have to. Even create a proof of concept demo if necessary. But in the business plan, answer these questions and play it back to someone. So when you go to a conference or to your friends, to the gaming community and say, okay guys, what if? And if the response is a little humdrum, well, that kind of sounds cool, maybe, I think you better rethink your gameplay or whatever it is that they are having difficulty getting over and not really getting excited about your game. Middle of the road, hey, that's a great idea. That's just like Game X that I just downloaded. Well, that gets back to timing, right? What's your timing of your company and your game at that point? And it's okay, though, as an aside, to be second, right? There's a lot of cases, again, in our industry where second to the race is the winner. Angry Birds is one of them. You can look at Compaq and IBM with the original PCs, for example. Compaq was just like NASCAR, drafting IBM around the track for years before they finally passed them and became the #1 PC maker. So it's okay to be #2, but be aware of that. And you might not be aware of the millions of games that are out there in the App Store, but your friends might. So again, it's important to describe what you're doing in terms of your game in your business plan and get some feedback for it. And hopefully, as the bottom line says there, you get that response. Best game ever! When can I buy it? You know? Did I overmod? Yeah, it went completely out, didn't it? Okay, we're back. So the next thing is the market. And this is a good segue from the last speaker, Dr. Grimes. It's important to understand who your market is. It's important to basically get a market analysis summary in place in your business plan. Who are you marketing to? What market segment? Are you targeting 8 to 12-year-olds? Are you targeting male versus female? Are you targeting a specific culture or a specific region? Are you trying to be all-inclusive? You're trying to be like Disney where you want the kids and the parents to be able to play these games. You know, identify your target market. A lot of game developers decide early on, we're going to try and be all things to all people. And again, that's a mistake. You're going to spread yourself as thin as peanut butter. Your gameplay is going to be mediocre to the majority of the people that are playing it. Or you can make it really fantastic for a subsegment that are willing to pay for that. And when I get into monetization, that's going to come back to haunt us as well. Whether you're paying for the game or it's free to play. This decision on your market segmentation is going to come back to haunt you. And then put together a strategy for targeting that market segment. Because if you are targeting, for example, the 6 to 8-year-olds, most of them don't have bank accounts. Most of them don't have credit cards. Most of them are relying on mommy and daddy to buy them the games to put on their iPhone, to hand to them in the back seat of the car to keep them quiet as you're driving somewhere. So you have to understand that while the gameplay itself might be targeting 6 to 8-year-olds, the monetization strategy has to be something the parents are into. We were just walking the other day out of a dojo. One of our friends was just cursing and swearing. She was so upset. I said, what's the problem? My daughter just subscribed me to $10 a month. So this is the kind of thing that you need to be cognizant of when you're putting together your business plan is who are you going to market this game to? Be specific. Don't be afraid to be exclusive either to a market segment. No one's pressuring you. At the end of the day, this is a business. If you want to succeed, know your customer. Let's talk about monetization. You've got some choices here. If you take a look at the graphic though, and I know it's a little fuzzy, but take a look at this for a second. This is as of yesterday, the top grossing iPhone games on iTunes. And I know it's hard to read, but 2 out of the 200 were pay for games. 2. One of them was a GPS app, the other was Minecraft. Everything else is free to play. How they're on this chart though is because of the in-game purchases. So while a lot of gamers, game developers and indie startups that I talk to, and startups in general that are doing application development for the smart devices and others, they're going, yeah, we're going to go free to play. Be careful, because free to play does not mean money. There's a monetization strategy hidden somewhere in there that those games will then get you onto this list, hopefully, to make you a wild success. So the list goes on, and some of them, and one of our game producers is here today as well, and he and I have had great discussions, arguments, knock them down, drag them out, battles, emotional confrontations over some of these pay-to-play strategies like paywalls. He's just dead set against paywalls. Depending on the game, though, it might be appropriate. But this, again, comes back to when you're selecting a monetization strategy. I am not going to promote one over the other. This is strictly something you need to decide. But you need to decide it before, again, you write one line of code. It needs to go into the gameplay and the architecture. Decide up front which one or more of these strategies, and any others you can think of, to make money off your game are important, and design it in. And by that I mean make sure that it doesn't disrupt your gameplay. Make sure it doesn't piss off your players. The game wall, or the paywalls, for example, the obvious problem with them is 99% of the people are going to download your game for free and play it to those levels. And a good percentage of the people that would have been willing to pay for that game get so pissed off that they hit a paywall at a certain level, they actually just delete the game because they're tired of it. Had you weaseled your way in with a pay strategy, though, a monetization strategy, that was more conducive to your target market, you probably would have made a lot more money. There's more than one guides online that you can find if you Google it in terms of monetization strategies. Game Academy is one that comes to mind, where he enumerates all sorts of monetization strategies they've employed, and some of them are actually quite striking. By instrumenting a lot of his games, what they've discovered is what people are willing to pay, and what they're willing to pay in order to have just a feature or a function. I was shocked the other day when one of my kids came to me and said, Daddy, I spent 10 bucks to allow all my players in Team Fortress to form a conga line. What? As a parent, I'm sitting there going, I've clearly failed you, my son. You don't understand the value of money. But there are other games where some of the skins, some of the features, some of the items that you can purchase are in the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. It's stunning what some of these players will play. What I would not have considered paying 50 bucks for on a console 20 years ago, people are literally paying hundreds of dollars a year for the right to play. Why? Well, in some cases, as a businessman, you're looking at it as a financier, you're looking at it as it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. Before you know it, you spend $300 on the game. And you're happy about it. I could spend all day talking about the merits, and so could my producer, talking about the merits of monetization strategies. The point is, pick the ones that work for you. Make sure that you weave it into the architecture and gameplay before you start writing your code. Monetization strategies that are glued on after the fact fail miserably for a lot of the reasons that I outlined. So what about funding? Well, I'm going to review these in a little more detail as well. Show me the money. Well, certainly you can start off with self-funding. A lot of the developers, especially straight out of university, will do this. Again, it gets back to that funding strategy that a lot of object-oriented programmers like, inheritance. Go talk to your friends and family. Mom, Dad, can I spend a little of my inheritance, please? Can you loan me some cash? You know, can you up my allowance if I mow the lawn twice a week? You know, there you are, 23, still mowing the lawn at home, putting along, trying to fund your game habit. There's credit cards, and there's gotchas with each of these. You know, a board member from one of my companies in the past, when we were doing a funding round raise, basically said, Terry, the reality is all money comes with hair. And what she meant by that was there's always some provisos or gotchas or some sacrifice down the road you're going to have to make where you're going to have to hold your nose and go, okay, I'll accept that for now just to keep the company going. Everyone who takes money from someone else in any form is going to have to do that. Also, though, there's the what you don't know really can't hurt you. You know, in one of my companies, we were getting pounded by our bank to get a corporate credit card. It's going to make our life so much easier. It's got easier terms than a personal credit card. The company's on the hook for it, blah, blah, blah. When you read the fine print, though, guess what the collateral is? The intellectual property rights of the company. So if you form a company and you decide, I'm going to fund it on credit cards, it's actually viable, and you'll actually have a lot of indie folks say, yeah, you can do that if your cash flow is good enough and you can make the payments. But be aware, you miss a payment and all of a sudden the bank owns your game. And they'll sell it to the lowest bidder because they just want to ditch that property as fast as they can. They don't know anything about games. They'll sell off that IP rights for a nickel. By tracking every last acquisition, I just bought a new mouse, I just bought a new printer, those can all potentially be written off. The government will literally pay you to go buy equipment, depending on what kind of scientific research, experiment, or development you're doing. But you're going to need this to back it up. Because again, even the government doesn't give that money away for free. They want to see a scientific report at the end. Did you actually achieve the objectives? And what's interesting about it as an aside too, and why I loved Shred, was there had to be a potential for failure. Isn't that cool? The government will pay you to fail. Really cool. So as long as there's a potential to fail, you can apply for Shred funding. It's really neat. So I'm going to mix it up a bit. There's some programmers in the room. How do programmers always mix up Halloween and Christmas? There's your answer. This is a programmer test. Every time I hire a programmer, I show them this joke. If they're not laughing, I just go, what? You're not a real programmer, are you? It's octal 31 equals decimal 25. Programmers are going, oh, geez, yeah, 3 times 8, 24 plus 1, 25, decimal 25. Ha, 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 Terry. So, what are your next steps? So you have to decide, do you want to incorporate federally, provincially? Do you want to just be a business and just go get a vendor's permit in Ontario? Do you want to just declare all of your earnings on your personal taxes? Up to you. You know, your organization structure is your organization structure. But make sure it's conducive to what you want to do, to your growth plans, etc. You want to decide, like I said, do you want to be a developer or a publisher or both? You know, I asked that question at the start. You know, one of the things that Painted Lemur does, for example, is we're both a developer of games. We're also a publisher of our own games, but we also work with other developers to publish their games. because they don't want to go through all the nonsense that I just outlined in terms of running the business. They just want to do what they love best, putting fingertips to keyboards, putting pixels on canvas, and writing the best games that they can. So divide and conquer, there's nothing wrong with that. We, for example, outsource some of our own business. Our HR is completely outsourced, for example. Enables me to offer tremendous benefits packages to my employees. So I outsourced it. So take a look at what you can do, what you're best at, stick to your knitting, and outsource everything else. We live in a day and age where you can outsource pretty much anything and everything. And partner. So if you just want to be a developer and not a publisher and worry about all this and just want to collect royalty checks, let someone else worry about it, partner with a publisher. Make sure you're getting the good terms though. Make sure that your IP is not at risk, etc. Keep refining and reviewing your plan. I can't stress this enough either. Were your assumptions valid? Maybe I got to reset my assumptions. You know, a lot of times, especially in games, you discover that, you know, you thought you were targeting a particular demographic, only to discover it's a completely different demographic that's actually downloading your game. You had no idea they'd be interested in that, but you know, some facet of gameplay or whatever is attractive to them. And so you want to now start tweaking and tuning your business plan in order to optimize your revenues for that.